What the hell is that doing on my land?
I'm staring at a pristine private runway carved straight through my family's wheat field, with $1 million jet taxiing for takeoff like it owns the place. I was gone for 3 months. 3 months dealing with my father's cancer treatment in Houston, and I come home to find the Willowbrook HOA turned my 80-year-old heritage farm into their personal airport. Vivian Ashworth Sterling, our HOA queen, waves from the jet's stairs in her designer dress.
Welcome back, darling. Hope you don't mind it. We completed the community improvement project while you were dealing with family issues.
Mind. They paved over my grandfather's wheat with asphalt and runway lights. This is my land. Was your land, she smirks, climbing into the jet. Check your mailbox. Legal papers are all there. But here's what Vivian doesn't know. I'm about to turn her own game against her in ways she never saw coming. Comment where you're watching from. 3 months ago, I had everything. A 200-acre heritage farm my grandfather bought with his own blood, and a government job that actually meant something. Today, I'm staring at legal papers that just stole my family's legacy while I was watching my father die. My name is Griffin Delacroix. Monday through Friday, I'm FAA Regional Director for the Southwest Division, managing air traffic policy from a sterile Dallas office, controlling every aircraft operation from Texas to New Mexico. But weekends? That's when I drive home to the farm my grandfather built in 1943, still smelling like motor oil and stubborn determination. This land fed 3 generations of Delacroix. Dad expanded the operation in the 70s, built relationships with every restaurant and farmer's market within 50 miles. The sweet vanilla scent of August corn mixing with morning coffee steam, the satisfying crunch of wheat stalks under your boots during harvest, the rough texture of soil that remembers your grandfather's hands. This wasn't just farming, this was legacy. Willowbrook Estates grew up around us over 15 years, slow and careful at first. When they started developing, nobody complained about having a quaint working farm in their backyard. Property values shot through the roof. Tech executives and oil money moved in, charmed by authentic rural character. They used our farm in their marketing materials. Live alongside genuine Texas agricultural heritage. Residents would bring potential buyers to our harvest festivals, buy our organic corn for their fancy dinner parties, even borrow my tractor when their expensive equipment died trying to mow 5-acre lots like suburban lawns. But leadership changes, doesn't it? Enter Vivian Ashworth Sterling, real estate heiress whose family built half the strip malls between here and Austin. She looks at fertile farmland and sees wasted potential. Why grow food when you could park private jets? Marcus, she told me last spring, stepping carefully around mud puddles and designer boots. That eastern field would make a gorgeous community recreation area. I laughed, wiping dirt off my hands. It makes gorgeous food, Vivian. The smile never reached her cold blue eyes. Progress demands sacrifice, darling. When Dad got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, I had no choice. 3 months in Houston, sleeping in hospital chairs that smelled like disinfectant and despair, watching the strongest man I knew shrink to nothing while machines beeped out his final heartbeats. That's when the vultures circled. 2 weeks after I left, Vivian called an emergency HOA session. Claimed my irrigation system was creating flooding risks to community foundations. Complete bullshit. But she had official-looking paperwork and scared neighbors. Emergency powers let them act fast to protect public safety. Here's their 4-step playbook for legal theft. Step 1, file emergency petition with county officials while victim is unreachable and grieving. Step 2, hire friendly appraisers to value prime aviation land at agricultural rates, $2,000 per acre instead of $50,000 market value. Step 3, deposit that insulting fair compensation into court escrow. Step 4, start construction immediately under emergency infrastructure permits. Mrs. Rosalie, my 70-year-old neighbor who'd brought soup during Dad's first chemo rounds, called me sobbing. Marcus, they threatened my property taxes if I voted against them. I couldn't afford. I'm so sorry. My bank, where I'd been a customer for 30 years, suddenly froze my equipment loans. Policy changes, they mumbled. Farm workers got told I'd agreed to sell and their services weren't needed. Even got a fake sympathy card from Reginald Sterling's law firm. Condolences on your loss. Enclosed, please find property transfer documentation. Dad died asking about the fall harvest. And I told him everything was perfect, because what else could I say? That our century-old legacy was disappearing under asphalt and runway lights while I held his morphine-weakened hand? The bitter taste of hospital coffee mixed with pure rage kept me awake those final nights. The legal papers waiting in my mailbox were beautiful in their precision. Emergency condemnation for public safety, proper compensation deposited, all procedures followed to the letter. Reginald's law firm had crafted the perfect crime. But here's what none of them knew. Emergency condemnation requires actual emergencies, not irrigation systems working perfectly for decades. And federal law demands proper notice to affected parties. Notice I never received because I was holding my dying father's hand 3 hours away. They thought they'd found the perfect victim. Grieving farmer, legally ignorant, too broke for real lawyers. They were wrong on all counts. The first thing I did when I got home was hire a lawyer. Not some country attorney who handles wills and divorces, but Rebecca Martinez from Austin, the woman who'd made developers cry in 3 different counties fighting agricultural land grabs. "Marcus," she said, spreading HOA documents across my kitchen table. "They screwed up bad. I've seen this before. Developers use emergency condemnation for hurricanes and chemical spills, not irrigation ditches that have worked since Truman was president. Your case has legs." While Rebecca built our legal foundation, I started my own investigation. Trail cameras went up around the property perimeter, military-grade equipment I'd learned about through FAA security briefings. The familiar weight of surveillance technology reminded me of airport security installations I'd overseen. That's when I discovered Vivian wasn't just stealing farmland. She was building an empire. My cameras caught her hosting inaugural flight celebration parties every weekend. Wealthy Willowbrook residents flying in from Dallas, Colorado, even Martha's Vineyard. The sharp whine of private jets landing where corn used to grow made my teeth ache. She'd printed glossy brochures advertising exclusive charter service to premier destinations and was charging $500 monthly aircraft storage fees. The woman was running a commercial airport on my stolen land. But those midnight surveillance sessions revealed something Vivian never expected. Hidden microphones picked up a conversation that made my blood freeze. Her voice cutting through cricket noise. Timeline was perfect. We researched his hospital visits through visitor logs, knew exactly when he'd be unreachable. County Commissioner Bradley, a man I'd voted for twice, laughed like he was discussing weather. Cancer timing was a gift. Nobody questions emergency action when a man's grieving his dying father. They'd planned this for 6 months. Dad's illness wasn't opportunity, it was their weapon. Here's where it gets almost funny. Vivian hired a private investigator to research my financial vulnerabilities. Poor bastard spent 3 weeks trying to figure out what FAA regional director actually means. His report, which Rebecca obtained through discovery, concluded I was probably some kind of airport maintenance worker with authority delusions. If only he knew. Rebecca filed our federal lawsuit Tuesday morning. Due process violations, improper emergency designation, fraudulent property appraisal. The bitter taste of legal coffee mixed with satisfaction as we hit them with everything. Then Vivian showed her true power. By Friday, my FAA supervisors were fielding anonymous complaints about my abuse of federal authority for personal vendettas. Phone calls from congressmen questioning my fitness for government service. Someone had mapped every bureaucratic pressure point. The same week, government agencies swarmed my remaining operations like locusts. EPA testing groundwater contamination that didn't exist. OSHA investigating phantom safety violations. Even the IRS showed up asking about unreported agricultural income. None found violations, but the message was crystal clear: surrender or drown in paperwork. That's when Rebecca's team uncovered the smoking gun buried in HOA financial records, a payment to Lone Star Aviation Consulting, $500,000 for emergency runway development services. I recognize that company name from federal aviation databases most people can't access. Lone Star Aviation was owned by Reginald Sterling's law firm. They'd been filing aircraft registrations for half the HOA board for over a year. "Son of a bitch," I whispered, staring at the registration numbers on my computer screen. These people hadn't just stolen my land. They'd been buying jets and planning their private airport while Dad was getting his first chemo treatments. But here's what they didn't know about this particular airport janitor. I don't just have access to aircraft databases. I control them. Every airplane registration, every flight plan, Every commercial aviation operation in the Southwest runs through systems I oversee, and Vivian's little illegal operation was about to light up my radar like a Christmas tree. The sweet morning air that once carried the scent of ripening wheat now reeks of aviation fuel. Jet engine whines have replaced the meadowlark songs Dad loved. Even the texture of morning dew feels different on asphalt instead of soil. Standing in what used to be my grandfather's wheat field, watching Vivian's third charter flight of the week taxi for takeoff, I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and started documenting every tail number, every passenger count, every violation of federal aviation law happening on my stolen land. They wanted to play in my world. Perfect. Because in aviation, I don't just make the rules, I enforce them. "Enjoy the view while it lasts, Vivian," I muttered, watching her Mercedes pull away from the terminal they'd built where my corn used to grow. You have no idea what's coming. The autumn wind carried diesel fumes across ground that should have smelled like fresh earth. But patience is a farmer's virtue, and revenge tastes sweetest when it's perfectly timed. Rebecca's lawsuit hit Vivian like a freight train, but the woman didn't just roll over. She brought out the big guns. Monday morning, I woke to the sound of diesel engines and official voices. County inspectors were crawling over my remaining property with clipboards and attitudes, their boots grinding into soil that smelled like morning dew mixed with bureaucratic bullshit. "Anonymous complaint about groundwater contamination," the lead inspector muttered, avoiding eye contact while he violated dirt that had been clean for 80 years. "Contamination from what?" I demanded. "Agricultural runoff, pesticides, chemical fertilizers." He shrugged like he was discussing the weather instead of destroying my family's reputation. By noon, the parade continued. Fire marshal claiming my barn violated storage regulations from 1987. Building inspector questioning permits my father had filed decades ago. Animal control showed up asking about livestock noise complaints. Hilarious since I hadn't kept cattle in 5 years. The harassment was systematic, professional, expensive. But 30 years in federal service teaches you things, like how every government agency keeps records of inspection requests. Public records, if you know where to look. I made some calls. Turns out all 6 anonymous complaints traced to the same phone number. Sterling & Associates law firm. "Got the bastards," Rebecca grinned when I brought her the documentation. "Malicious prosecution adds another federal charge to our case." But Vivian was already planning her next move. Thursday evening, checking trail cameras around the runway, I heard voices carrying across the stolen farmland. Hidden microphones picked up Vivian with some aviation consultant. Expensive suit, briefcase covered in airline logos. "We need full commercial operations by Memorial Day," Vivian was saying, her heels sinking into grandfather's soil with each step. "Charter service to Aspen, Jackson Hole, Martha's Vineyard. Premium clients demand premium access." The consultant nodded. "Understood. But commercial operations require FAA certification. Current setup only allows private use." Ice water hit my veins. Commercial aviation permits crossed my desk. "Not a problem," Vivian flashed that predator smile. "We have friends in federal aviation. This Griffin situation won't be an issue much longer." Friends in federal aviation. I spent the weekend diving through personnel records, cross-referencing political donations and family connections. The trail led straight to Deputy Administrator Harold Blackwood, Old Texas money, Georgetown law, and recipient of $50,000 in consulting fees from sterling companies. Blackwood was 3 levels above me, high enough to crush careers and connected enough to know about any investigation before it started. But regional directors have something deputy administrators don't: direct database access they can only see through official channels. The sharp whine of morning jet traffic now drowned out birdsong my father loved. Every day brought more aircraft, Gulfstreams, citations, experimental models requiring special permits nobody had requested. I documented everything: tail numbers, passenger counts, commercial operations masquerading as private flights. The real prize came Tuesday morning when surveillance caught Vivian's phone call with Harold. "The farmer's becoming a problem," she said, pacing near runway lights installed where my corn used to grow. "Can't you just transfer him to Alaska?" Laughter from the phone. "Performance reviews, budget cuts, reorganization. There are ways to make problems disappear." "Perfect. Make it look routine." That afternoon, email arrived from Washington. Organizational Efficiency Review, Southwest Division. My position faced evaluation for redundancy in a streamlining initiative. signed by Deputy Administrator Harold Blackwood. They weren't just stealing my land, they were destroying my career, but they'd made a fatal mistake. In their rush to neutralize the problem farmer, they'd exposed the entire corruption network. Political payoffs, abuse of federal authority, conspiracy to retaliate against whistleblowers, documented in communications they never knew I could access. I sat in my kitchen that night, surrounded by printouts that could topple careers in Washington. The bitter taste of cold coffee mixed with satisfaction as I realized something important. This wasn't about my farm anymore. This was about showing these bastards what happens when you corner the wrong federal employee. Every phone call, every financial transaction, every violation they thought was hidden, I had it all. And unlike Vivian's political friends, I understood something crucial about federal law enforcement. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Time to introduce Vivian to the real power of government authority. The metallic click of my secure phone dialing FBI Financial Crimes Division echoed through the kitchen. Agent Sarah Rosalie answered on the second ring. Agent Rosalie, this is Griffin Delacroix, FAA Southwest Regional. I have evidence of federal aviation law violations, political corruption, and conspiracy involving a deputy administrator. How soon can we meet? The sweet smell of justice was about to replace aviation fuel in my morning air. Agent Sarah Rosalie met me at a truck stop outside Willowbrook the next morning, her black sedan looking out of place between pickups hauling cattle trailers. The familiar smell of diesel fuel and bacon grease from the diner reminded me of Saturday mornings with Dad, when our biggest worry was whether corn prices would hold through harvest. "Mr. Delacroix," she said, sliding into the cracked vinyl booth across from me, "these are serious allegations. Deputy administrator involvement, political corruption, systematic aviation law violations. We're talking 20-year federal sentences." I spread evidence across the sticky Formica table like a poker player revealing a royal flush. It's all documented. Phone recordings, financial transfers, abuse of emergency powers. They destroyed my family's farm and tried to end my career. But they got careless. Sarah's eyes widened as she flipped through transcripts and bank records. "This Blackwood character, we've had him on our radar for other irregularities. Your case might crack open something much bigger." But while I was building federal cases, Vivian was building financial bombs. I returned home to find a county tax assessor's truck in my gravel driveway. The thin man clutching his clipboard looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. "Mr. Delacroix, I'm here about your property reassessment." His voice shook like autumn leaves. "County's reevaluated your remaining land at commercial aviation rates." The paperwork hit me like a physical blow. Annual property taxes, $47,000, due in 30 days. Commercial aviation rates? This is farmland that's grown crops for 80 years. Not according to new county zoning. Your property's classified as aviation industrial due to proximity to active runway facilities. He couldn't meet my eyes saying it. The vicious brilliance was breathtaking. They couldn't steal my remaining land directly, so they'd tax me into bankruptcy, force financial ruin, then swoop in as the generous buyers offering rescue from debt they'd created. But I'd learned something crucial about fighting corruption. When they escalate, you escalate harder and smarter. "Sarah," I called Agent Rosalie immediately, "they just weaponized the tax system. How fast can federal investigators audit county assessment practices for civil rights violations?" "Already initiating," she replied. Funny how sudden tax increases trigger automatic federal scrutiny when they coincide with whistleblower retaliation. Meanwhile, Vivian launched her media nuclear option. Local newspapers' front page screamed, "Rogue federal employee terrorizes community leaders." The hit piece painted me as an unstable bureaucrat abusing government authority to harass innocent developers. Anonymous sources claimed I'd threatened to ground civilian aircraft out of personal spite. Made me sound like some power-drunk air traffic controller gone rogue. But that evening, Vivian handed me the biggest gift of the entire war. My surveillance system captured her meeting with 3 men in expensive suits near the runway lights that now blinked where my grandfather's wheat used to wave. The audio quality was crystal clear in the still night air. "The Griffin problem requires permanent resolution," Vivian was saying, her designer heels grinding into soil that remembered my father's footsteps. "Can your people arrange an administrative accident? Budget cuts, reorganization, performance review irregularities?" One suit chuckled like they were discussing weather. Deputy Administrator Blackwood's already processing termination procedures, but if you want absolute guarantee, that costs extra. How much? $200,000. Cash. Usual offshore account. My blood turned to ice water mixed with pure fury. They weren't just trying to fire me, they were purchasing my destruction from inside the federal government, but they'd just committed federal bribery on tape. I spent that sleepless night copying every recording, every document, every piece of evidence to secure servers in 3 states. If something happened to me, everything would automatically release to FBI, congressional oversight, and national media. Dawn brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Rosalie appeared at my kitchen door, tears streaming down her weathered face, her hands shaking like cottonwood leaves in winter wind. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. They came last night. Vivian, that lawyer husband, HOA security, said if I kept supporting you, they'd destroy my grandson's military career, have his security clearance revoked." The metallic taste of rage flooded my mouth. Threatening an elderly woman's family crossed every moral line. "Mrs. Rosalie, please tell me you recorded this." Through her tears, she smiled and pulled out an ancient flip phone. "Honey, I've been recording everything since they first threatened my property taxes. My grandson taught me before his last deployment to Afghanistan." That's when lightning struck my brain. Vivian had been so obsessed with neutralizing me, she'd completely ignored the entire community of people she'd bulldozed, threatened, and terrorized. Time to show her what happened when you underestimated the collective fury of Texas neighbors. "Sarah," I dialed Agent Rosalie, my voice steady as morning coffee. "I've got federal bribery, witness intimidation, and conspiracy on tape. How's tomorrow sound for arrest warrants?" "Perfect. And Griffin, bring Mrs. Rosalie. Her testimony just made this a RICO case." That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of everything, Dad's death, the stolen farm, corruption reaching into Washington, pressed down like suffocating August humidity. So I did what farmers do when the mind won't quit. I sat at my kitchen table and worked. Rebecca had dumped 3 boxes of subpoenaed HOA financial records on me weeks ago. Spreadsheets, bank statements, construction contracts, mind-numbing paperwork I'd been avoiding. But at 3 a.m., with nothing but black coffee and pure fury for company, I started digging. What I found made my hands shake so hard I spilled coffee across the first page. The Willowbrook HOA was completely, utterly broke, not just short on cash, criminally, federally, go-to-prison broke. They owed $3.2 million in infrastructure bonds, money borrowed for community improvements that had somehow cost triple the estimates. The construction company that did the work? Sterling Development, owned by Vivian's family. They'd charged $5 million for $2 million worth of road improvements, then graciously loaned the HOA money at 18% interest to cover their own inflated costs. The aviation facility wasn't about luxury or property values. It was a desperate cash grab to avoid bankruptcy and federal fraud charges. But that was just the appetizer. Cross-referencing aircraft tail numbers through FAA databases revealed something that made my blood turn ice cold. Shell companies. Dozens of them, all traced back to Sterling Family Holdings. Lone Star Aviation, Texas. Premier Charter, Southwest Executive Transport. Fake companies operating a real commercial airline using my stolen land as their illegal hub. The acrid smell of aviation fuel mixing with morning coffee suddenly made perfect sense. This wasn't recreational flying. This was organized crime disguised as community development. They'd picked the absolute worst farmer in Texas to steal from. See, Vivian thought targeting me was brilliant because my government position made me vulnerable to political pressure. She figured some simple farmer with a desk job wouldn't understand federal power or know how to use it. She couldn't have been more wrong. As FAA Regional Director, I don't just oversee aircraft operations. I control every database that tracks airplanes, pilot licenses, and commercial permits across 5 states. More crucially, I have direct authority to initiate federal aviation safety investigations and enforcement actions. Every commercial flight requires permits that cross my desk. Permits I'd never seen for Willowbrook operations. That meant every charter flight was a federal crime. Every passenger was evidence. Every dollar of revenue was money laundering. Every landing was another nail in their coffin. The morning sun painted golden light across the runway that used to grow my grandfather's wheat. And suddenly, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was strategically thinking like the federal administrator I'd spent 30 years becoming. I didn't need to fight for my land back. I could destroy their entire criminal empire and send them to federal prison for decades. But I needed overwhelming prosecution-proof evidence, maximum violations, maximum exposure, maximum federal crimes. That's when the perfect plan hit me like lightning. Labor Day weekend, Willowbrook's annual celebration, when Vivian planned to showcase her aviation facility to wealthy investors and political donors. She'd invited congressmen, state officials, business leaders. Maximum publicity for maximum violations. I'd let them operate, let them expand, let them commit every federal aviation crime imaginable while I documented it all with surveillance equipment they'd never detect. Then, when they felt most successful, most secure, most untouchable, I'd unleash 30 years of federal authority right into their faces. The sweet irony tasted better than morning coffee. They thought they were robbing a helpless farmer. Instead, they'd been building their criminal conspiracy under the direct supervision of the one federal official with power to destroy them completely. Time to show Vivian what happened when you stole from the wrong government employee. The next morning, I started building the most elaborate federal trap in law enforcement history. First call, Agent Sarah Rosalie. Sarah, I need 3 months to document every crime they're committing. Can you coordinate agencies without spooking them? What's your timeline? Labor Day weekend, RICO prosecution, aviation violations, tax evasion, money laundering, political corruption. I want them facing life sentences when we're done. Her laugh crackled through the phone. Marcus, you beautiful, vengeful farmer, send me everything. While Sarah assembled her federal task force, I transformed my remaining farm into a surveillance operation that would make the CIA jealous. Hidden cameras went up along property lines, disguised as irrigation equipment Dad had taught me to maintain. The familiar weight of tools in my hands reminded me of weekend repairs we'd done together, back when the biggest threat was equipment failure, not federal crimes. High-definition audio pickups positioned to catch runway conversations. Motion sensors tracking every aircraft movement. The sweet irony? All the equipment came through legitimate FAA security channels for airspace safety monitoring around unauthorized facilities. Nobody questions a regional director improving aviation security, but my masterpiece was the monitoring station installed in Dad's old workshop. Every aircraft requires electronic transponders that automatically report to federal systems, tail numbers, altitude, speed, destinations. My receivers would capture everything, creating official government records of ongoing crimes. It's like I told Rebecca when she visited, they're not just committing crimes, they're filing federal paperwork about their crimes. And the surveillance network went live mid-June during Vivian's first investor tour. Wealthy aviation enthusiasts from Dallas and Houston, all eager to buy into exclusive private aviation access. My cameras caught everything. Unlicensed charter operations, unregistered passengers, unreported commercial revenue, but the audio was pure gold. $50,000 initiation fee plus hourly flight rates, Vivian was telling potential investors, her designer heels clicking on asphalt that used to echo with my grandfather's work boots. Complete privacy, political access, exclusive destinations. Political access. She wasn't just selling flights. She was auctioning influence through her corruption network. The metallic click of surveillance equipment recording federal crimes became my new favorite morning sound, better than roosters crowing. July brought escalation beyond my wildest expectations. Daily charter flights to Colorado, Martha's Vineyard, even international destinations. My monitoring systems documented systematic violations of customs law, international aviation agreements, federal tax codes. Here's something I learned from 30 years in federal service. Criminals always overreach. Give them success and they'll expand until they commit every possible violation. Vivian's operation was now breaking so many laws simultaneously that prosecution would be like shooting fish in a barrel. They were also expanding physically. Construction crews building a passenger terminal where my sweet corn used to grow, complete with customs facilities and fuel storage violating every environmental regulation in Texas. But the crown jewel came in August when surveillance captured Vivian's phone call with Deputy Administrator Blackwood. "Harold, we need federal certification expedited for our Labor Day demonstration," she said, voice carrying clearly across Dad's old wheat field. "Certification costs extra, $2 million, usual accounts." Done. "And Harold, our Griffin problem needs permanent resolution after Labor Day. no loose ends. They were planning my professional assassination as their finale. Perfect. Nothing like documented conspiracy to commit federal employment crimes. I spent August coordinating agencies like conducting a symphony, FBI financial crimes handling arrests, DEA investigating money laundering, EPA addressing environmental violations, IRS seizing assets, FAA investigators documenting aviation crimes. The plan was beautiful. Let them host their celebration with congressmen, state officials, media coverage, document every violation in real time, then activate coordinated federal enforcement during maximum public exposure. Mrs. Rosalie stopped by one evening bringing homemade pie and updates from neighborhood surveillance. "Marcus, that woman's been telling people you're mentally unstable from grief, says you'll be taken care of after Labor Day." "Mrs. Rosalie, keep recording everything. After this weekend, we'll be the ones doing the taking care of." Her weathered smile reminded me why I was fighting, not just for my land, but for every neighbor they'd bullied and threatened. By Labor Day Eve, I had evidence of criminal conspiracy involving dozens of federal laws, multiple agencies, and political corruption reaching into Washington. The acrid smell of aviation fuel had replaced the sweet scent of ripening crops, but every illegal takeoff added another charge to my growing federal case. Sitting in my kitchen, surrounded by surveillance monitors and coordination documents, I raised my coffee mug in a toast to Dad's memory. "They thought they were building an empire, Dad. Turns out they were just constructing their own prison sentences, one federal crime at a time." Outside, jets whined where meadowlarks used to sing, but tomorrow federal justice would restore the natural order. Time to show Vivian what happened when you stole from the wrong government employee. August brought Vivian's most vicious escalation yet. She turned my own government against me. I woke Tuesday morning to the sharp rap of official knocking. Through my kitchen window, I saw black SUVs in the driveway and men in cheap suits examining my surveillance equipment with the cold efficiency of federal predators. "Mr. Delacroix," the lead investigator announced, flashing FAA internal affairs credentials, "we're executing a federal search warrant regarding abuse of authority, misuse of government resources, and personal vendetta against legitimate community development." The bitter taste of betrayal flooded my mouth as I realized the scope of Vivian's counterattack. She hadn't just bought Deputy Administrator Blackwood. She'd weaponized the entire federal oversight system against me. What specifically am I accused of? Using FAA surveillance equipment for personal vendettas, threatening lawful aviation businesses with groundless investigations, violating federal employee ethics through conflicts of interest. His voice carried the bureaucratic cruelty I'd learned to hate during 30 years of government service. But here's what these investigators didn't understand. Every piece of equipment they were questioning was perfectly legitimate. Every surveillance activity documented as authorized airspace safety monitoring. Every database access within my regional director authority. I'd been following federal regulations longer than some of these agents had been alive. While IA ransacked my barn, my hidden surveillance system captured the real story. Vivian's triumphant call to Blackwood echoed through equipment they hadn't found. "Beautiful work, Harold. Is he finished?" "Performance review scheduled for day after Labor Day. Complete termination package ready. He'll be lucky to get unemployment benefits when we're done." The metallic click of handcuffs seemed to echo in their laughter. But Wednesday brought an escalation that turned my blood to ice water. My surveillance caught Vivian meeting with 3 men whose expensive suits couldn't hide the predatory way they moved. Professional violence wrapped in corporate camouflage. "The federal investigation complicates things," Vivian was saying, her designer heels grinding into soil my grandfather had worked with his bare hands. "But Griffin still needs permanent resolution." The largest suit shrugged like discussing weather. "Stressed federal employee under investigation. Car accidents happen. Brake failure. Mechanical problems. Very sad, very believable." Timeline? Day after Labor Day. Right after his termination hearing. Distraught government worker, career destroyed, takes tragic final drive home. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the recording device. They'd escalated from theft to corruption to planning my murder, but they'd just committed conspiracy to commit homicide on federal surveillance equipment. Thursday's local news ran coordinated hit pieces that would have impressed Joseph Goebbels. Rogue FAA official under federal investigation. Disgraced bureaucrat terrorizes community leaders. Anonymous sources claiming I'd threatened to crash civilian aircraft out of personal spite. The woman on Channel 7 actually said, "Sources close to the investigation suggest Griffin Delacroix may be suffering from grief-induced mental breakdown following his father's death." Using Dad's memory to justify their crimes made me see red. That evening, Rebecca called with news that changed everything. "Marcus, Discovery just revealed financial records showing this operation spans 4 states, 12 confirmed farms stolen for illegal aviation networks, over 3,000 acres of agricultural land." The magnitude hit me like a physical blow. My farm wasn't their only victim. They'd been systematically destroying family agriculture across the Southwest for years. "How many families, Rebecca?" "Dozens. All targeted during personal crises, deaths, illnesses, financial hardship. They research vulnerable farmers like predators stalking wounded prey." The sweet evening air carrying jet noise instead of cricket songs suddenly represented something much larger than personal revenge. This was about protecting every family farmer in America from systematic corporate predators. Friday evening, I stood in Dad's wheat field, now covered with aircraft preparing for Monday's celebration. Congressmen, state officials, business leaders, all invited to witness Vivian's community achievement. The acrid stench of aviation fuel had completely poisoned air that used to smell like growing things and honest work. But every illegal aircraft on my stolen land represented another documented federal crime. My phone buzzed. "All federal teams positioned, arrest warrants signed, media coordinated, ready for your signal. Agent Rosalie." I typed back, "Monday morning, when they're all here, completely exposed, absolutely confident they've destroyed me." Sunday night, I visited Dad's grave one last time before the war ended. The cold marble headstone felt like a promise under my fingers. "Tomorrow, Dad. Tomorrow we get justice for every farmer they've destroyed." The distant whine of jets preparing for Monday's celebration carried on wind that should have been bringing the sweet scent of autumn harvest. Instead, it would bring the satisfying sound of handcuffs clicking on wrists that had stolen too much from too many for too long. Time to show these bastards what happened when you declared war on the wrong federal employee. Labor Day morning dawned with the kind of crystal-clear Texas sky that makes you believe in divine justice. But the sweet September air carried the sound of federal helicopters positioning around Willowbrook, instead of the meadowlark songs Dad used to love. Vivian's community aviation celebration was everything she'd promised. A circus of wealth, power, and criminal arrogance that would have made P.T. Barnum weep with envy. By 9 a.m., luxury aircraft were landing every 10 minutes on my stolen runway. Gulfstreams, Citations, even a Boeing business jet that required the entire length of what used to be my grandfather's wheat field. My surveillance equipment captured every tail number, every passenger manifest, every violation of federal aviation law happening in real time. The guest list read like a who's who of political corruption. 3 congressmen, 2 state senators, the governor's chief of staff, and enough business executives to fill a federal prison wing. All here to celebrate the successful public-private partnership that had stolen my family's legacy. But the morning's real surprise came when a black limousine pulled up to the makeshift terminal and out stepped Deputy Administrator Harold Blackwood himself. "Marcus," Agent Rosalie's voice crackled through my earpiece, "your boss just showed up to the party. This keeps getting better." I watched through binoculars as Vivian greeted Blackwood with the kind of embrace reserved for co-conspirators sharing federal crimes. The audio from my hidden microphones was crystal clear. "Harold, darling, perfect timing. The termination paperwork? Signed this morning, effective immediately after today's festivities. Griffin Delacroix will be unemployed by sunset and under federal investigation by dawn." "And the other matter we discussed?" "All arranged. Very tragic accident scheduled for his drive home tonight." The metallic taste of pure fury flooded my mouth as I realized they were planning my murder as the grand finale to their celebration. But they'd made one fatal mistake. Every word was being recorded by federal surveillance equipment, creating an official government record of conspiracy to commit homicide. The ribbon-cutting ceremony began at 11 a.m. with all the pomp of a state funeral, which, in a way, it was. They were burying the last remnants of agricultural heritage in favor of corporate aviation convenience. Vivian stood at a podium where my corn used to grow, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most farmers made in a year. Today marks a new chapter for our community, a transition from outdated agricultural practices to modern economic development. The crowd of wealthy sociopaths applauded like she'd just cured cancer instead of stealing farmland. Congressman Bradley took the microphone next. This facility represents the kind of public-private partnership that makes America great. Sometimes progress requires difficult decisions, but the results speak for themselves. I nearly choked on the irony. These people were celebrating theft as patriotism. But the best part came when Blackwood addressed the crowd. As Deputy Administrator of the FAA, I'm proud to announce this facility has received full federal certification for commercial aviation operations. Except it hadn't. I'd never signed those permits because they'd never been properly filed. Blackwood had just committed federal fraud in front of 300 witnesses and every media outlet in the state. My phone buzzed with updates from Agent Rosalie. Teams in position, media coordinated, federal judges standing by, ready for your signal. I typed back, "Wait for my cue. I want maximum exposure." At 1 p.m., they unveiled their masterstroke, a bronze plaque honoring community leaders who made this transformation possible. Vivian's name topped the list, followed by every corrupt official who'd participated in stealing my land. They were literally creating a monument to their own criminal conspiracy. That's when I decided it was time. I walked out of my surveillance position and approached the celebration crowd, every eye turning toward the disgraced federal employee they thought they'd destroyed. The crowd parted like I was carrying some contagious disease, whispers following my path to the speaker's platform. Vivian's face went white as fresh paint when she saw me approaching. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice carrying across the runway built on my stolen land. "I'm Griffin Delacroix, and I have something important to share about this wonderful celebration." Security started moving toward me, but I held up my hands. "Don't worry, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to thank everyone for gathering here today to document the largest federal aviation crime operation in Texas history." The crowd went silent except for the distant whine of jet engines that would never fly again. "You see, for the past 6 months, you've all been participating in a criminal conspiracy involving theft of agricultural land, illegal commercial aviation operations, federal permit fraud, political bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder." Vivian tried to grab the microphone, but I was just getting started. "And every single moment has been recorded by federal surveillance equipment operating under my authority as FAA Regional Director for the Southwest Division." That's when I gave Agent Rosalie the signal that would change everything. The moment I raised my hand, the Texas sky erupted with federal justice. FBI helicopters descended like mechanical angels, kicking up dust clouds that sent Vivian's designer hat flying into the crowd. Federal agents rappelled down ropes with the precision of a military operation, their black tactical gear stark against the blue September sky. "FBI, nobody move! This is a federal raid!" The crowd of corrupt politicians and wealthy criminals scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on. Congressmen diving behind luxury cars, business executives frantically deleting phones. The governor's chief of staff actually tried to hide under the buffet table, but there was nowhere to run. Agent Rosalie had positioned teams at every exit, every aircraft, every possible escape route. The Willowbrook Aviation Facility had become a federal cage. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced over the chaos, my voice carrying across the runway through speakers meant for Vivian's celebration, "allow me to properly introduce myself. I'm Griffin Delacroix, FAA Regional Director, and you've all just attended the most well-documented federal crime scene in aviation history." Vivian stood frozen at the podium like a deer in headlights, her face cycling through disbelief, rage, and pure terror as she watched her empire crumble in real time. "That's impossible!" she screamed, spittle flying from her perfectly painted lips. "You're unemployed. You're under investigation. Harold destroyed you." Deputy Administrator Blackwood was trying to disappear into the crowd, but federal agents had already surrounded him. The man who'd planned my termination was now face down on asphalt, hands zip-tied behind his back. "Actually, Vivian," I continued, savoring every word like fine wine, "Harold just committed federal fraud by claiming non-existent permits, every word of which was recorded by official FAA surveillance equipment." Agent Rosalie stepped up to the microphone, her FBI credentials glinting in the afternoon sun. "This is Agent Sarah Rosalie, FBI Financial Crimes Division. For the past 6 months, we've been conducting a joint federal investigation into systematic theft of agricultural land, illegal aviation operations, political corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder." The crowd's murmur turned to panic as the scope became clear. Every aircraft landing here today violated federal aviation law. Every passenger participated in unlicensed commercial operations. Every payment constituted money laundering. Every political favor represented federal bribery. County Commissioner Bradley tried to run for his Mercedes, but face-planted when Agent Thompson tackled him into the dirt. His arrest was broadcast live on 3 different news channels, but the best moment came when they arrested Vivian. Vivian Ashworth Sterling, Agent Rosalie announced, approaching with handcuffs that gleamed like jewelry. You're under arrest for conspiracy, theft, federal aviation violations, money laundering, political bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder. This is harassment, Vivian shrieked as they cuffed her hands behind her back. Political persecution. I have rights. I have connections. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Rosalie replied with professional satisfaction. Which I strongly recommend, since everything you've said for the past 6 months has been recorded as evidence. The media explosion was instantaneous. News helicopters circled overhead like vultures. Reporters with microphones pressed forward, shouting questions about the scope of the corruption. Mr. Delacroix, Channel 7's anchor called out, how long have you been planning this investigation? I looked directly into the camera, thinking about Dad's memory and every farmer they'd destroyed. Since the moment they stole my family's land while I was watching my father die, nobody steals from American farmers and gets away with it. Not on my watch. The arrests continued like a parade of justice. Reginald Sterling led away in handcuffs while screaming about legal immunity. 3 congressmen arrested for accepting aviation bribes. County officials, state transportation bureaucrats, even the private security guards who'd threatened Mrs. Rosalie. But the visual that would make national news was the aircraft seizure. Federal marshals were already attaching chains to million-dollar jets, preparing to tow them away as evidence. The same luxury aircraft that had symbolized Vivian's power were now monuments to her stupidity. Every aircraft on this stolen land is now federal evidence, Agent Rosalie announced to the media. Total asset seizure exceeds $50 million. As they loaded Vivian into a federal transport vehicle, she caught my eye through the bulletproof glass. Her look of pure hatred mixed with disbelief was worth every sleepless night I'd spent building this case. You just destroyed the biggest federal criminal conspiracy in Texas history, I called out to her. All because you thought a simple farmer wouldn't fight back. The crowd of media and onlookers erupted in applause as federal vehicles departed with their cargo of corrupt officials. The same runway built on my stolen wheat field was now the scene of the most satisfying federal enforcement action in aviation history. Standing in the middle of what used to be my grandfather's farm, surrounded by federal agents and justice finally served, I felt Dad's presence in the sweet September wind. We'd won. 6 months later, I'm standing in my grandfather's wheat field again, because that's exactly what it is once more. The federal court moved faster than a Texas tornado. Emergency injunction restored my property within 30 days. Full agricultural protection designation followed within 60. By Christmas, the illegal runway was nothing but expensive gravel I sold to the county for road repairs. The criminal sentences read like a revenge fantasy come to life. Vivian drew 12 years in federal prison for conspiracy, theft, and racketeering. Her husband Reginald got 15 years for federal document fraud and money laundering. Deputy Administrator Blackwood received 20 years for abuse of federal authority and conspiracy to commit murder. County Commissioner Bradley, 8 years and lifetime ban from public service. The 3 congressmen all resigned in disgrace, with 2 facing federal trials for bribery. Even their private security thugs got federal prison time for intimidating witnesses. But the real victory came from asset forfeiture. $53 million in seized aircraft, property, and criminal proceeds. The federal judge ordered every penny distributed to affected farming families across 4 states. Mrs. Rosalie got enough money to secure her grandson's college education and buy a new house closer to her daughter. The 12 other farming families received full compensation plus damages for years of harassment and stolen agricultural production. My share went toward something Dad would have loved, the Heritage Farm Protection Foundation. We've helped 67 farming families fight developer harassment in the past 6 months, provided legal assistance, federal advocacy, and emergency financial support. What happened to me will never happen to another American farmer if I can prevent it. The foundation operates from Dad's old workshop, now converted into a legal aid center staffed by agricultural rights attorneys, former federal investigators, and farmers who've survived similar attacks. The sweet scent of morning coffee mixes with the satisfying sound of victory phone calls from families we've helped save their land. But the best part is what's growing in my fields again. This spring, I planted heritage wheat varieties my grandfather brought from Europe in 1943. The golden stalks whisper in morning breezes that carry bird songs instead of jet engine noise. Sweet corn grows where Vivian's terminal used to pollute the earth, reaching toward Texas sky that's blue and clean again. Local restaurants are fighting over my organic produce like it's culinary gold. The Saturday farmers market reserves my entire harvest before seeds even hit the soil. Community-supported agriculture memberships sold out in 3 hours, with a waiting list that runs until 2027. Willowbrook residents voted to dissolve their HOA entirely, replacing it with agricultural protection covenants that permanently prevent commercial development. Property values actually increased when the Heritage Farm designation made the area a protected agricultural zone. The annual Heritage Harvest Festival draws thousands of visitors celebrating sustainable farming and government accountability. Kids from Dallas suburbs learn where food actually comes from, while their parents discover the difference between corporate agriculture and family farming. We've turned what used to be Vivian's aviation celebration into education about agricultural heritage, community resistance, and standing up to corruption. Last month, a Congressional Agriculture Subcommittee held hearings here about protecting family farms from developer harassment. My nephew graduated college with a degree in sustainable agriculture and federal policy. He's moving back to help expand our operation and carry our family legacy into the 4th generation. The farm that almost died under asphalt and corruption will survive another century in Delacroix hands. Rebecca Martinez now runs our legal clinic, helping farmers navigate federal regulations and fight corruption. Agent Sarah Rosalie retired from FBI to become our chief investigator, applying federal law enforcement techniques to agricultural protection. Every morning, I walk through wheat fields that remember my grandfather's hands, breathing air that smells like growing things instead of aviation fuel. The rough texture of grain stalks under my fingers reminds me why this fight mattered. Not just for my family, but for every family that feeds America. Standing where Vivian's runway used to scar the earth, I can almost hear Dad's voice in the wind. Well done, son. Well done. The Heritage Farm Protection Foundation has one simple mission: ensure no corporation, no HOA, no corrupt politician ever again destroys a family farm while owners are dealing with illness, death, or personal crisis. We've got federal law enforcement training, agricultural rights expertise, and 30 years of bureaucratic knowledge focused on one goal: protecting the people who feed America.
You know what really gets me about Griffin's story? Is not the federal arrest or even watching Vivian get dragged away in handcuffs. It's what happened after. See, Griffin could have just taken his farm back and called it even. But he didn't stop there. He used that $53 million in seizing criminal assets to create the Heritage Farm Protection Foundation. Now there have been farming families across America fight off the same predators who try to destroy him. That's the real lesson here. When bullies come for you, and they will, you have choices. You can let them break you, or you can learn the rules better than they do and turn their own game against them. Marcus didn't win because he got lucky. He won because he understood something most of us forget: knowledge is power, but only if you are willing to use it. Every federal regulation he knew, every database he could access, every contact he built over 30 years, it all became a weapon when he needed it most. So tell me, what skills or knowledge do you have that your HOA probably doesn't know about? Drop it in the comment, because I guarantee someone reading this is dealing with the same garbage right now and could use the help. And subscribe if you believe bullies could face consequences. Because the only thing worse than getting pushed around is staying down when you have the power to fight back.